Hey friends, welcome back to another live Tuesday night live horror reading. And I'm glad you're here. Thanks for spending part of your Tuesday evening with me. Regarding the Thursday podcast, the late night, uh, someone suggested that we do it at 10 p.m. Eastern instead of 11 p.m. Eastern. And I said I'd be happy to do whatever the majority wants. I took a poll in on the YouTube channel, and like the overwhelming majority wants me to move it down to 10 Eastern, which I am very happy to do. So expect that on Thursday night. It'll be an hour earlier. Of course, it'll show that on the preview. Excuse me. Wow. So that'll be just the same time as tonight. Um, I guess that'll make it easier to remember too for everyone. Be 10 p.m. Eastern, which would be 9 p.m. Central and 7 p.m. Pacific. And unless I miss my guess, 3 a.m. in London, off the top of my head. So, hey, everybody. Kelly, Scott. Let's see. Hey, Chaz, Alan. I thought I saw Alan type some. Yeah, there it is. And Frank, I think, right? Sometimes it's hard to remember people's real names with the YouTube ID, or at least it is for me, because of my fun Fireball Fog. Monty. Boy, he's been. Oh, jeez. Monty, you are. You need to take it down a notch, buddy. Sorry, folks. Hey, he just did something to my cord, so. Hey, tell me that you can still hear me. Okay, good. Evidently you can. Yes, I love him, but he just needs to calm down a little bit right now. So, hey, Donna. Hope you're feeling all right. Donna and everyone. Uh, Rough health day for me, but that happens, so no big deal. I've got some coffee here, which will help me. So, last week, if you remember, I read H.P. Lovecraft's story, The Tomb. And the reason why I did that is because over on the Patreon, we're starting a Patreon podcast series discussing a lot of Lovecraft stories, and we started with that. When we're done with Lovecraft, we'll go to Arthur Machen or Poe, or we'll go all over the place. But we're starting with Lovecraft. So that's going to be a lot of fun. I posted the link to that in case you missed it at the very beginning of the live chat. So anyway, if you're a Patreon, I hope you enjoyed it or will enjoy it when you get a chance to listen to it. But all that is to say is that we're still in the middle of The Night Ocean by R.H. Barlow and H.P. Lovecraft. Um, I've said this a million times, but one of my very favorite short stories. So previously on Tuesday Night Live Horror Reading, previously we got, I'm going to guess, around 20% into the story. And basically, all that's happened really is, in case you weren't here for that or you need a refresher, this painter um, was creating something for a contest, and when he was done, he was mentally and emotionally exhausted, so he went to rent a cottage on a beach in Florida, very isolated cottage. So, and he is reminiscing about the ocean, things like that, and about the town that's about a mile away. And it is isolated. That's the thing to remember. There's there's nothing around for about a mile. All right. I doubt I will get through the whole thing, but I will hopefully finish it next week if I don't. I'm sure I'll finish it next week if I don't. Let's start with the last paragraph that I've already read. So I'm ready if you guys are. Oh, by the way, if this is your first time watching this, um, yeah, I'm not a professional and I don't claim to be. And this live horror reading is all about me reading to you guys, and then occasionally I'll comment on something. So it's not like listening to an audiobook because that would be more professional. All right. The monotony of the waves gave repose, and I had no other occupation than witnessing a myriad ocean moods. Sounds great. There is a ceaseless change in the waters, colors and shades pass over them, like the insubstantial expressions of a well-known face. And these are at once communicated to us by half-recognized senses. When the sea is restless, remembering old ships that have gone over her chasms, there comes up silently in our hearts the longing for a vanished horizon. But when she forgets, we forget also. Though we know her a lifetime, she must also hold an alien air, as if something too vast to have shape were lurking in the universe to which she is a door. The morning ocean, glimmering with a reflected mist of blue-white cloud and expanding diamond foam, has the eyes of one who ponders on strange things, and her intricately woven webs, through which dart a myriad colored fishes, hold the air of some great idle thing, which will arise presently from the hoary immemorial chasms and stride upon the land. I like the previous sentence. Though we know her a lifetime, she must always hold an alien air, as if something too fast to have shape were lurking in the universe to which she is a door. That one. Oh, thank you, Donna. I was content for many days, and glad that I had chosen the lonely house, which sat like a small beast upon these rounded cliffs of sand. Among the pleasantly aimless amusements fostered by such a life, I took to following the edge of the tide, where the waves left a damp, irregular outline rimmed with evanescent foam for long distances. And sometimes I found curious bits of shell in the chance litter of the sea. There was an astonishing lot of debris on that inward curving coast which my bare little house overlooked, and I judged that currents whose courses diverge from the village beach must reach that spot. At any rate, my pockets, when I had any, generally held vast stores of trash, most of which I threw away an hour or two after picking up, wondering why I had kept it. Once, however, I found a small bone, whose nature I could not identify. save that it was certainly nothing out of a fish, and I kept this, along with a large metal bead whose minutely carven design was rather unusual. This latter depicted a fishy thing against a patterned background of seaweed, instead of the usual floral or geometrical designs, and was still clearly traceable, though worn with years of tossing in the surf. Since I had never seen anything like it, I judged that it represented some fashion, now forgotten, of a previous year at Elston, where similar fads were common. Hi, Suzanne. Oh, hey, guys, I got this out to show you. This is really cool. Came out, I think, in the 80s from Necronomicon Press. And let's see here. It's got illustrations in it. Yeah, illustrated by Jason Eckhart. I know Jason. He's a good guy. And yeah, copyrights 78, 82, 86, 89 by Necronomicon Press. So there's some of the print there, which I'm not reading from this copy right now because my eyes aren't that good. I think I'm going to have to do it. I think I'm going to have to get cheater glasses. All right, I had been there perhaps a week when the weather began a gradual change. Each stage of this progressive darkening was followed by another subtly intensified, so that in the end the entire atmosphere surrounding me had shifted from day to evening. This was more obvious to me in a series of mental impressions than in which I actually witnessed. For the small house was lonely under the gray skies, and there was sometimes a beating wind that came out of the ocean bearing moisture. The sun was displaced by long intervals of cloudiness, layers of gray mist beyond whose unknown depth the sun lay cut off. Though it might glare with the old intensity above that enormous veil, it could not penetrate. The beach was a prisoner in a hueless vault for hours at a time, as if something of the night were welling into other hours. Although the wind was invigorating and the ocean whipped into little churning spirals of activity by the vagrant flapping, I found the water growing chill, so that I could not stay in it as long as I had done previously, and thus I fell into the habit of long walks, which, when I was unable to swim, provided the exercise that I was so careful to obtain. These walks covered a greater range of sea edge than my previous wanderings, and since the beach extended in a stretch of miles beyond the tawdry village, I often found myself wholly isolated upon an endless area of sand as evening drew close. When this occurred, I would stride hastily along the whispering sea border, following the outline so that I should not wander inland and lose my way. And sometimes, when these walks were late, as they increasingly grew to be, I would come upon the crouching house that looked like a harbinger of the village, insecure upon the wind-gnawed cliffs, a dark blot upon the morbid hues of the ocean sunset, It was more lonely than by the full light of either orb, and seemed, to my imagination, like a mute, questioning face turned toward me, expectant of some action. That the place was isolated, I have said, and this at first pleased me. But in that brief evening hour when the sun left a gore-splattered decline and darkness lumbered on like an expanding shapeless blot, there was an alien presence about the place, a spirit, a mood, an impression that came from the surging wind, the gigantic sky, and that sea which drooled blackening waves upon a beach grown abruptly strange. At these times I felt an uneasiness which had no definite cause, although my solitary nature had made me long accustomed to the ancient silence and the ancient voice of nature. These misgivings, to which I could have put no sure name, did not affect me long, yet I think now that all the while a gradual consciousness of the ocean's immense loneliness crept upon me, a loneliness that was made subtly horrible by intimations, which were never more than such, of some animation or sentience, preventing me from being wholly alone. The noisy yellow streets of the town, with their curiously unreal activity, were very far away, and when I went there for my evening meal, mistrusting a diet entirely of my own ambiguous cooking, I took increasing and quite unreasonable care that I should return to the college cottage before the late darkness, although it was often sorry, although I was often abroad until 10 or so. I'm going to silence my phone. There we go. You will say that such action is unreasonable, that if I had feared the darkness in some childish way, I would have entirely avoided it. You will ask me why I did not leave the place, since its loneliness was depressing me. To all this I have no reply, save that whatever unrest I felt, whatever of remote disturbance there was to me in brief aspects of the darkening sun, or in the eager, salt, brittle wind, or in the robe of the dark sea that lay crumpled like an enormous garment so close to me, was something which had an origin half in my own heart, which showed itself only at fleeting moments, and which had no very long effect on me. That sentence reminds me of Poe's poem Alone, which I'm sure you guys are familiar with. From childhood's hour, I have not been as others were. Let's see. In the recurrent days of diamond light with sportive waves flinging blue peaks at the basking shore, the memory of dark moods seemed rather incredible. Yet, only an hour or two afterward, I might again experience these moods and descend to a dim region of despair. Perhaps these inward emotions were only a reflection of the sea's own mood. For although half of what we see is colored by the interpretation placed upon it by our minds, many of our feelings are shaped quite distinctly by external physical things. The sea can bind us to her many moods, whispering to us by the subtle token of a shadow or a gleam upon the waves, and hinting in those ways of her mournfulness or rejoicing. Always she is remembering old things, and these memories, although we may not grasp them, are imparted to us, so that we share her gaiety or remorse. Since I was doing no work, seeing no person that I knew, I was perhaps susceptible to shades of her cryptic meaning which would have been overlooked by another. The ocean ruled my life during the whole of that late summer, demanding it as recompense for the healing she had brought me. One sec. There were drownings at the beach that year, and while I heard of these only casually, such as our indifference to death which does not concern us, and to which we are not witness, I knew their details were unsavory. The people who died, some of them swimmers of a skill beyond the average, were sometimes not found until many days had elapsed, and the hideous vengeance of the deep had scourged their rotten bodies. It was as if the sea had dragged them into a chasm lair and mulled them about in the darkness until, satisfied that they were no longer of any use, she had floated them ashore in a ghastly state. No one seemed to know what had caused these deaths. Their frequency excited alarm among the timid, since the undertow at Elston was not strong, and since there were known to be no sharks at hand. Whether the bodies showed marks of any attacks, I did not learn, but the dread of a death which moves among the waves and comes upon lone people from a lightless, motionless place, is a dread which men know and do not like. They must quickly find a reason for such death, even if there are no sharks. Since sharks perform, since sharks formed only a suspected cause, and one never to my knowledge confirmed, the swimmers who continued during the rest of the season were on guard against treacherous tides rather than against any possible sea animal. Autumn, indeed, was not a great distance off, and some people used this as an excuse for leaving the sea, where men were snared by death, and going to the security of inland fields where one cannot even hear the ocean. So August ended, and I had been at the beach many days. There had been a threat of a storm since the 4th day of the new month, and on the 6th, when I set out for a walk in the damp wind, there was a mass of formless cloud colorless and oppressive, above the ruffled, leaden sea. The motion of the wind, directed toward no especial goal, but stirring uneasily, provided a sensation of coming animation, a hint of life in the elements which might be the long-expected storm. I had eaten my luncheon at Elston, and though the heavens seemed the closing lid of a great casket, I ventured far down the beach, and away from both the town and my no longer to be seen house. As the universal gray became spotted with the carrion purple, curiously brilliant despite its somber hue, I found that I was several miles from any possible shelter. This, however, did not seem very important, for despite the dark skies with their added glow of unknown presage, I was in a curious mood of detachment, paralleling that glow, a mood which flashed through a body grown suddenly alert and sensitive to the outline of shapes and meanings that were previously dim. Obscurely a memory came to me, suggested by the likeness of the scene to one I had imagined when a story was read to me in childhood. That tale, of which I had not thought of for many years, concerned a woman who was loved by the dark bearded king of an underwater realm, of, of an underwater realm of blurred cliffs, where fish things lived, and who was taken from the golden-haired youth of her troth by a dark being, crowned with a priest-like mitre, and having the features of a withered ape. What had remained in the corner of my fancy was the image of the cliffs beneath the water, against the hueless, dusky, no sky of such a realm. And this, though I had forgotten most of the story, was recalled quite unexpectedly by the same pattern of cliff and sky which I then beheld. The sight was similar to what I had imagined in a year now lost, save for random, incomplete impressions. Suggestions of this story may have lingered behind certain irritating, unfinished memories, and in certain values hinted to my senses by scenes whose actual worth was bafflingly small. Hey Dave, thanks for the email. I'm really glad that your cat is feeling better. Frequently, in flashes of momentary perception, the conditions more than the object being significant, we feel that certain isolated scenes and arrangements, a feathery landscape, a woman's dress along the curve of a road by afternoon, or the solidity of a century-defying tree against the pale morning sky, hold something precious, some golden virtue that we must grasp. And yet, when such a scene or arrangement is viewed later, or from another point, we find that it has lost its value and meaning for us. Perhaps this is because the thing we see does not hold that elusive quality, but only suggests to the mind some very different thing which remains unremembered. The baffled mind, not wholly sensing the cause of its flashing appreciation, seizes upon the object exciting it, and is surprised when there is nothing of worth therein. Thus it was when I beheld the purpling clouds. They held the stateliness and mystery of old monastery towers at twilight, but their aspect was also that of the cliffs in the old fairy tale. Suddenly reminded of this image, I half expected to see, in the fine spun dirty foam, and among the waves which were now as if they had been poured of flawed black glass, the horrid figure of that ape-faced creature, wearing a mitre old with verdigris, I don't know what that word means, advancing from its kingdom to some lost gulf, to which those waves were sky. I did not see any such creature from the realm of imagining, but as the chill wind veered, slitting the heavens like a wrestling knife, there lay in the gloom of merging cloud and water only a gray object, like a piece of driftwood tossing obscurely on the foam. This was a considerable distance out, and since it vanished shortly, may not have been wood, but a porpoise coming to the troubled surface. One of the things I really like about this story, oh, thanks, Alan. Alan says that means green copper patina, is, well, it doesn't spell things out. The whole story is about impressions that this guy has that something really strange is going on behind the scenes. And yeah, that's my favorite thing about it. I'm constantly looking for that feeling when I read new stories or books. I soon found that I had stayed too long contemplating the rising storm and linking my early fancies with its grandeur, for an icy rain began spotting down, bringing a more uniform gloom upon a scene already too dark for the hour. Hurrying along the gray sand, I felt the impact of cold drops upon my back, and before many moments my clothing was soaked throughout. At first I had run, put to flight by the colorless drops whose pattern hung in long linking strands from an unseen sky. But after I saw that refuge was too far to reach in anything like a dry state, I slackened my pace and returned home as if I had walked under clear skies. There was not much reason to hurry, although I did not idle as upon previous occasions. The constraining wet garments were cold upon me, and with the gathering darkness and the wind that rose endlessly from the ocean, I could not repress a shiver. Yet there was, beside the discomfort of the precipitous rain, an exhilaration latent in the purplish, reveled masses of cloud, and the stimulated reactions of my body. In a mood half of exultant pleasure from resisting the rain, which streamed from me now and filled my shoes and pockets, and half a strange appreciation of those morbid, dominant skies which hovered with dark wings above the shifting eternal sea, I tramped along the gray corridor of Elston Beach. More rapidly than I had expected, the crouching house showed in the oblique flapping rain, and all the weeds of the sand cliff writhed in accompaniment to the frantic wind, as if they would uproot themselves to join the far-traveling element. Sea and sky had altered not at all, and the scene was that which had accompanied me, save that there was now painted upon it the hunching roof that seemed to bend from the assailing rain. I hurried up the insecure steps and let myself into a dry room, where, unconsciously surprised that I was free of the nagging wind, I stood for a moment with water rilling from every inch of me. There are two windows in the front of that house, one on each side, and these face nearly straight upon the ocean, which I now saw half obscured by the combined veils of the rain and of the imminent night. From these windows I looked as I dressed myself in a motley array of dry garments seized from convenient hangers and from a chair too laden to sit upon. I was imprisoned on all sides by an unnaturally increased dusk, which had filtered down at some indefined hour under cover of the storm. How long I had been on the reaches of wet gray sand, or what the real time was, I could not tell, though a moment's search produced my watch, fortunately left behind, and thus avoiding the uniform wetness of my clothing. I half guessed the hour from the dimly seen hands, which were only slight less indecipherable than the surrounding figures. In another moment my sight penetrated the gloom, greater in the house than beyond the blared window, and saw that it was 6:45. Night, Chaz. There had been no one on the beach as I came in, and naturally I expected to see no further swimmers that night. Yet when I looked again from the window, there appeared surely to be figures blotting the grime of the wet evening. I counted three moving about in some incomprehensible manner, and close to the house another, which may not have been a person, but a wave-ejected log, for the surf was now pounding fiercely. I was startled to no little degree and wondered for what purpose these hardy persons stayed out in such a storm. And then I thought that perhaps, like myself, they had been caught unintentionally in the rain and had surrendered to the watery gusts. In another moment, prompted by a certain civilized hospitality which overcame my love of solitude, I stepped to the door and emerged momentarily, at the cost of another wetting, for the rain promptly descended upon me in exultant fury, emerged momentarily on the small porch, gesticulating toward the people. But whether they did not see me, or did not understand, they made no returning signal. Dim in the evening they stood as if half surprised, or as if they awaited some other action from me. There was in their attitude something of that cryptic blankness, signifying anything or nothing which the house wore about itself, as seen in the morbid sunset. Abruptly there came to me a feeling that a sinister quality lurked about those unmoving figures who chose to stay in the rainy night upon a beach deserted by all people, and I closed the door with a surge of annoyance which sought all too vainly to disguise a deeper emotion of fear, a consuming fright that welled from the shadows of my consciousness. A moment later, when I had stepped to the window, there seemed to be nothing outside but the portentous night. Vaguely puzzled and even more vaguely frightened, like one who has seen no alarming thing, but is apprehensive of what may be found in the dark street he is soon compelled to cross, I decided that I had very possibly seen no one, that the murky air had deceived me. Let's see where we're at. Yes, we still have a ways to go, so there would definitely be a part 3. I'll link them all together for those of you who are watching this later. You won't have to wait. I'm going to read a couple more paragraphs here and then go to bed. The aura of isolation about the place increased that night, though just out of sight. On the northward beach, 100 houses rose in the rainy darkness, their light bleared and yellow above streets of polished glass, like goblin eyes reflected in an oily forest pool. Yet because I could not see them, or even reach them in bad weather, since I had no car, nor any way to leave the crouching house, except by walking in the figure-haunted darkness, I realized quite suddenly that I was, to all intents, alone with the dreary sea that rose and subsided unseen, unkinned in the mist, and the voice of the sea had become a hoarse groan, like that of something wounded, which shifts about before trying to rise. Fighting away the prevalent gloom with the soiled lamp, for the darkness crept in at my windows and sat peering obscurely at me from the corners like a patient animal. I prepared my food, since I had no intention of going to the village. The hour seemed incredibly advanced, though it was not yet 9 o'clock when I went to bed. Darkness had come early and furtively, and throughout the remainder of my stay lingered evasively over each scene and action which I beheld. Something had settled out of the night, something forever undefined, but stirring a latent sense within me, so that I was like a beast expecting the momentary rustle of an enemy. You know, a writer that I admire once said in an interview that, I'm paraphrasing this, but one of his main, uh, what's the word? Not, you know, one of his main intentions, or that's the wrong word. Sorry, I'm tired. But when writing, he always said to himself, explain nothing, which is what happens in this story. He's a really great writer, and if you're wondering who he is, his name is Scott Thomas. And Scott, I freaking horribly paraphrased what you said in that interview. All right, so we will join our unnamed protagonist next week while still in the middle of this night and go from there. So, to everyone watching and listening, thank you so much for spending part of your Tuesday night with me. Sorry about my throat. And I hope you guys are having a good week. And I will see you Thursday night at 10 p.m. Eastern, not 11 p.m. So, same time on Tuesdays and Thursdays from now on. So, thanks everybody. Hope you all have a great night, and I'll see you on Thursday.